No, I don't have a text from him.
Okay. I will deal with that afterwards.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. And yeah, it's very weird to see everybody on Zoom after being together so often. And yeah, I miss the warmth of everyone's bodies in the room and the chatter that happens. So, but I'm really glad today, really thrilled to be able to welcome Rita Mancera and Gabriel and Manuel to this session to talk about farm workers on and what the situation on the South Coast. But let me introduce Rita to you. Rita is someone that I consider a justice warrior. And she is someone, after Rebecca just shared that beautiful reading, Rita is someone that holds the light no matter what is going on around her. And the other thing with her love and her passion and her expertise invites others to bring that light in. And I've known Rita for many years working with at Puente, and she's the executive director there. The work that they do is absolutely phenomenal across the community. And I think it was like 6 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go spend a whole afternoon with Rita. And we went everywhere. No matter where we went, everyone knew her. You know, whether it was getting a cup of coffee or sitting down or walking down the street, she is really, she's kind of like the mayor of Pescadero, really, I would say. So anyway, welcome, please, Rita, and please open your hearts and your minds and commit in this moment to take the stories that she shares and that Gabriel and Manuel share with you. So welcome, Rita.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to join you. Thank you so much for the invitation. Before I talk about anything else, I want to introduce you to who is sharing the space with me today to share really like their stories with you. It's people that I admire very much, and at the same time, I could really pick anyone from the community with no preparation, and their life and their stories and their messages are amazing every time that I talk to them. So on the glasses, you have Manuel, and Manuel has done a lot of farm work in the community, and he's wearing glasses because he just went through a couple of surgeries, eye surgeries, and I'll let him talk about some of his experiences. And I think particularly, I think his struggles have mostly been with housing and with health. And then we have next to him, Gabriel. And Gabriel has been a farm worker for a long time. He was one of the founders of Puente, along with our Reverend Wendy Taylor, and he's one of the first men Wendy started talking to on the street to find out what were the needs of farm workers. Eventually, Gabriel was part of our board of directors for many years. And now something that when we get to talk to them, what I want to highlight is housing. I think for him, for what he has shared with me, is one of the biggest struggles, but also aging. And there's an increasing number of farm workers aging in our community with no safety net services provided by our institutions. And so that's why also the work of organizations, you know, like the nonprofits, it's so important to provide some of that. And I'll tell you why it is so hard, because you will think, why doesn't he just go back to Mexico with his family? It's just like a lot of, it's like an onion, and there's a lot of pieces to the story. And then next to Gabriel is another Manuel. And Manuel is more of the newcomers to the community, younger. And so there's a different a story there. So kind of wanted to be able to offer you some different perspectives. So muchas gracias a los tres por venir y por participar. When I'm not talking, I'm going to be translating to them. And they know that when I'm talking, I won't be able to translate, but I'll explain them. I already explained them what this was about. Okay, so I think before, I just wanted to do a really quick intro on what Puente does, just to put some things in context. And so this is where I would like, if you can help me check to project the slides, and we'll skip some of them because I want to use most of the time to talk to our guests.
Sure, I'm getting it up for you. There you go. Okay, you should be able to see it now.
Okay, thank you. If you can click the slideshow button, that'll be great. But otherwise, I think is we can see it. So great. So we are on the south coast of San Mateo County. It is a very unique region. And over the years, our vision and our mission had evolved to catch up with the needs of our times. But we're here basically to promote and advocate for equitable access to health, education, and economic security. And sometimes I think about Puente like these 5 nonprofits in one, because each of the programs is so robust and so inclusive of so many different programs on its own. Can you go to the next one, please, Chuck?
Yep.
And so these are our values, and we really try to live up to them. And this is why, especially the one I want to share with you is share strength, because at Puente, I mean, nonprofits have their own history of why nonprofits started and kind of like the expectations of what to do. And sometimes there's this like hero feeling on nonprofits, and we wanted to make sure that we understand our community as much as there's a lot of needs. It's a really strong community, is very resilient, and they make a lot of contributions. And so they bring their strength, and then we bring ours, and ours is more technical, more on the advocacy side of things, providing tools, providing services, but it is a teamwork effort. And this picture is of La Sala, which we will be talking in a little bit. And La Sala is how Puente started and continues after 25 years. And it's a gathering every week at the Pescadero Community Church where people share meals, warm meals. And then, like Miguel here in the picture, sometimes he comes and plays music for the people that come. And then there's always like board games. They love to play domino. They're very competitive about it. And then also very, very often they bring, because we operate our center from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., then usually they come in the evenings to La Sala, and they will bring like letters they need to translate or documents they got on the mail, and they need, some help to figure out what that is. The next slide is actually about where we are and the people that we serve. And there was a time where Puente was serving everyone or that's what we were saying, but we really wanted to make sure people knew that we serve people that lives or works in these 4 towns, regardless of immigration status. But we have 6 groups that are the core for us. Farm workers, low-income households, and so that's why we serve, Latinx community, but also Anglo low-income community, children 0 to 5 years old, the students and the parents in our local school district, first-generation college students, and more recently we started working with seniors because there was really like a lot of work and a lot of support that they needed. So I want to skip all the way to our strategic priorities. That's number 6. You can go to the next one, Chuck. Thank you. Because this is where housing fits for us. And I just wanted to put it in perspective. So we have 3 strategies that we want to work on. One is to increase socioeconomic security, and that's where our housing initiative is. And then to develop educational opportunities for students in the local school district, and then to do some in-depth work at Puente. But if you go to the next one, I'll show you some of our initiatives that had to do with housing. Just one second. Thank you. And so when we decided to go into housing, we've known about this need for housing for a long time. And believe me, it's one of the hardest things for us to do. We're still in the very early stages. We know that the need is huge. And at the same time, the location that we have, because we are on the coast, and the regulations and the lack of infrastructure is almost like we need to start like 10 step backs compared to other communities. But it's something that we decided to do, and we're not giving up, and we're working really hard on identifying some land that we can help develop, particularly to focus on farm worker housing and low-income families housing. We attended this housing summit that Penny and others help organize, and we have so many things aligned. We have donors ready to help us with land. We have identified a developer that can do a small number of units. We actually have a partnership for technical assistance. Really, like at this point, we're like waiting just to identify the land, and then something that we do, I think, well, because there's some things that we're working on, but I think what we do well is to get the input from community members into what we do. And so there's this group called El Campo al Cambio. It's a group of farm workers that meet on regular basis, and they are advocating for two things. One is housing solutions for the South Coast, and the second one is for water. And tomorrow we're going with them to the Coastal Commission meeting in Santa Cruz, and I believe it's very likely that they are going to get an approval to amend the coastal plan so that the clean water can be extended to Pescadero High School. So that's going to be a big win, for San Mateo County, but also for some of the families that have been advocating for it for a long time. Chuck, if you can stop sharing for a moment. And you have, there's a lot of information on these slides about what we do, but I just want to move to talk to our guests first. And so the way that we're gonna do this, just because of the language, when they speak, I'm gonna try to do simultaneous interpretation, so you'll hear both of us talking. If it gets too messy, just stop me, and then we'll do where they talk and then I talk. I just don't know how you hear me on the other side with those voices, okay? So please just like unmute and say like, let's do it the other way, and we'll go that way, okay? Do some of you speak Spanish? Poquito? Okay, alrighty. Thank you. So vamos a comenzar. So let's start. And I want to introduce first Don Manuel. Vamos a platicar primero con el señor Manuel. Y Don Manuel, si usted les puede contar primero un poquito acerca de usted, de quién es usted y de dónde viene su experiencia en el campo, y luego ya nos cuenta cuál es su experiencia en cuestión de vivienda y de salud. ¿Sale?
A ver, podemos decir que estamos.
Pero hábleme más fuertecito, ¿eh?
Porque una que no sé leer y otra que no sé expresarme.
He said that, yeah, he's gonna give it a shot. He's concerned because he doesn't write well and he doesn't know how to express himself, but that's a lie. He didn't say that, I said that. Okay.
¿Con qué empezamos hoy? ¿A qué preguntas me van a hacer? ¿Cómo?
Tu nombre y cómo es que llegaste a trabajar a este país.
Mi nombre es Manuel Ángel
My name is
Núñez
Manuel Ángel Núñez
Rodríguez. Yo llegué pues
I
de México en
came
el
from Mexico in
1985.
1985.
Llegué aquí por primera vez aquí a
I
Pescadero
came for the first time here to Pescadero.
y estuve trabajando aquí en
And
una florería.
I was working for a nursery for about a year.
Me fui a trabajar
And then I went
al
to
fil
work
acá en Jamón Bay 9 años.
to farming Half Moon Bay, 9 years.
Trabajando allí.
And I was working there 9 years.
Y después de allí, de ese trabajo,
And then
me
after
cambié
that
aquí a
work,
uno que se llama Jacobs,
I came back to
Ahí
work in
trabajé
Pescadero at Jacob's Farm,
20 años.
and I worked there for 20 years.
Y después de ese trabajo, tuve ese otro aquí en el
And
Blue House.
then I started working at Blue House Farm,
En Blue House tuve 6
and I
años.
was working there 6 years.
Y ahorita, lamentablemente, pues, me
And
enfermé y tengo ahorita ya 2 años que no trabajo.
I haven't worked for 2 years because I got sick.
Pues, está medio complicado, pero
And it's
pues,
a little bit
gracias a Dios se la
complicated,
llevamos.
but thanks to God, I get along.
La llevamos. Primero Dios adelante. El primero es el que sale y pues ahí,
So,
gracias a Puente y
I
que
hope-
me han ayudado mucho.
I'm hoping
Doy
that
las
I
gracias a ellos que me han
can,
ayudado hartísimo.
continue and get out of this. And thank you to Puente for all the help that they provide too. Okay.
Sí.
Don Manuel, ¿y que nos puede comentar acerca de su opinión acerca de la vivienda de campesinos en Pescadero? So I'm asking him if he can share about his opinion on housing in Pescadero.
La
for
mera
farm
verdad
workers.
aquí para la vivienda ya está muy complicado.
So to be honest, talking about house is complicated.
Encontrar vivienda aquí
to
está muy
find
trabajoso.
Housing is very hard.
Luego se encuentra uno, oiga, pues,
And
cada rato nos suben la renta
If
muy
we
feo.
find something, they
nos-
also
nos
increase the
dan la
rent
raza,
very
no sé.
often.
Dice, cada rato nos están subiendo la
And
renta muy feo y pues
they are
sí, pa' uno
increasing
es medio
it
complicado.
very often, and for us it's complicated
Y no nomás para mí, para
afford
todas
it,
las
not just for
personas.
me, for everybody.
Y yo pienso que a ver si un día con el futuro pueden
And I
hacer algo
hope
por
that maybe
nosotros.
in the future there can be something done for us. ¿Dónde vive y con cuántas personas vive?
Allí donde yo vivo, pues, nomás lo
I
conozco por
live-
VJ.
I live
Pero
in a
ahorita-
farm called BJ's,
Ahorita estamos 18
and
personas.
there's 18 of us in one house.
Estamos viviendo 18 personas y pues todos estamos igual,
And,
sí.
you know, we are all, ¿cuántos en su cuarto?
En mi cuarto somos 3,
Three, in my room, there's 3 of us,
pero hay cuartos que tienen hasta 5.
but there's rooms that have up to 5 farm workers,
De a 5, de a 4 y
4 or
estamos.
5, and that's the reality.
Y pues es medio complicado, ya luego cuando se llega la hora de hacer lunch, pues
And
son
so
a la misma hora, se imagina
It is
todos
complicated even to make
los
lunch
18
because the 18 of
vamos
us are
por-
trying to
vamos
prepare
por turnos.
our food, and so we have a system to take turns to use the
Sí, esa es la
kitchen,
manera.
the shared kitchen.
Sí,
right?
así es, y pues es un poco complicado.
so-
Si en un futuro nos pudieran ayudar, pues, ¿verdad?
So it's hard. I hope that in the future someone can help us.
Yo sí pienso a ver qué, primero Dios, a ver qué pasa.
So let's wait and see what God provides. Gracias, don Manuel.
Muchas gracias, y agradezco la invitación.
Thank you, and
Y
I
esperamos
appreciate
otra
the
vez que nos inviten
invitation,
de
and I
nuevo.
hope you can invite us again. All right. Gracias, don Manuel.
Sí.
Translation working okay, you folks? Yeah, okay. Vamos a continuar con don Gabriel. And I don't know, I was trying to add the numbers that Manuel was saying. So I lost track. I don't know how many how many years he's worked in agriculture, but he doesn't look old. And he was talking about a lot of years, 20 here, 9 here, 6 here. And I'm like, so how old is him? ¿Cuántos años tiene don Manuel?
58 años.
So he's 58. And again, he hasn't worked in the last 2 years because he had some health challenges with diabetes, and now he got his 2 eye surgeries. But on the way here, we were talking that he said when he couldn't see almost anything, he was just so desperate that he felt that the best thing for him, it was actually to go. And he was just losing interest in life. And then he went through the surgery, and now the second surgery, and see, can he better? And he was laughing. He's like, oh no, I'm not ready to go yet. So I'm so glad what health can do, and what such a vital, sense like sight, the difference that it makes in people's lives. So, and we just hired a driver at Puente to take people to medical appointments. So I was just asking him how that was working, and so far, because it's a pilot program, but he says that it's going well. Okay, and then we'll do questions after, okay? Gabriel, si puedes contarnos primero, un poquito de ti, de dónde vienes, cómo llegaste aquí, pero si te acuerdas cuando luego me cuentas desde 19, no me acuerdo qué, un poquito más abreviado, ¿sale? Okay.
Y bueno, yo llegué aquí a
I
Pescadero
came to Pescadero
en 1984.
in 1988,
No miento,
No.
89.
1989.
Y desde que caí aquí a Pescadero,
And since I came here,
estuve trabajando
have been
en
working
una florería
in a nursery
de unos señores
of
italianos.
an Italian family.
Estuve con ellos, pues aquí he pasado muchos años,
I've
desde el 89,
Worked with them for a lot of years, since
Hasta el-
89
1925, más o menos, fue lo que estuve con ellos.
2005.
Ellos vendieron
They sold the
la
farm,
florería, o sea, el terreno, el negocio, mejor dicho,
they sold the business
porque ya no era negocio para
because
ellos lo de
it
las
was not a
flores.
good business anymore, the flower business.
Según las flores,
Ah,
fue negocio para ellos
What I heard from
hasta
them is that the
que-
flower
hasta
business
que
was
entró
good to them,
que se dio el mercado libre.
but once NAFTA, the
entonces
market
ya
opened,
entraron flores de
then
más
flowers
países,
started coming from other countries,
y las flores que ellos vendían
and the
aquí
ones that they were selling
bajaron
here,
el precio
they had to lower the price
muy barato y ya no les conviene
and sell
trabajar
them
en eso.
at a very low price, and it wasn't any more convenient to the family.
Entonces, después ellos vendieron, compraron unas personas
So
de China.
they sold, and then a Chinese family bought the farm,
Y estuve con ellos yo
and I was working with them
hasta más o menos del 2025.
2005.
Estuve,
So I was
Sí.
working with it from
estuve hasta
2005
el 2021.
until 2021.
De ahí, pues ya no he tenido un trabajo
then
yo estable, ya
I haven't had a stable job.
he andado trabajando pues
I've been working
2, 3 horas por
2,
un
3
lado,
hours in one place,
por otro.
another day
pero,
somewhere else.
bueno, la cosa es que yo no he tenido un
Is
trabajo
the
ya.
thing is that I haven't had a steady job.
Pero aquí estamos, este lugar
But
a mí me ha gustado mucho. el
I like this
clima,
place. I like the weather in
hay
Pescadero,
una
and
tranquilidad aquí en
it's
Pescadero.
very tranquil,
Yo me siento
and
mejor que en mi
I feel
tierra,
better than in my own land.
porque aquí monto una
Because here I
bicicleta
get
y
on a
me muevo
bicycle and I
donde yo
go
quiero.
wherever I want,
A pie o en bicicleta
or
anda
I
uno
walk
muy feliz y muy
and I'm
contento.
happy.
Y es un pueblecito aquí muy
And this is
seguro
a very safe
para vivir.
small town to live.
No tenemos preocupación
We
de.
don't
Ahora sí que como digo
we
Manuel,
don't
nomás
have
la
very big
preocupación
concerns.
es
Like Manuel was saying, the main worry
de la renta
is the rents,
que está muy escasa.
because there's very little housing.
O como él
It's
dice
very
también,
scarce.
seguido nos está
And
levantando
Often
el precio.
they are increasing the
Y
cost of
ya, la
rent,
verdad eso
and
que sí nos preocupa a uno.
that is what it worries me.
Yo ya eso, ya si no fuera por la ayuda que aquí me
If
da
it
la
hasn't been
organización,
because of the
Puente,
support that I get
Costa Rica,
here at Puente,
quizás ya hubiera corrido. Pero
maybe I would have
ellos
left
me han apoyado
already,
mucho
but
y me están ayudando hasta
they
ahorita.
continue supporting me.
Y gracias a ellos,
And-
pues yo, mientras me ayuden, como me
And
han
as long as I
ayudado,
get the support that I need,
pienso todavía seguir aquí.
I will
No sé
I will
cuánto
stay
tiempo,
here. I don't know how long,
pero estoy muy contento aquí.
but I'm happy.
Y yo vengo del estado de Guanajuato.
I am from the state of Guanajuato,
De Guanajuato partí yo para acá y llegué a este lugar y desde el 89 que llegué
I came
aquí en este
to this
lugar
place, and
estoy.
since '89 I've been in the same town,
Y pues aquí quiero seguir.
and I want to
Todavía no sé
continue
cuánto tiempo,
to be
pero
here. I don't know how much
yo
longer.
aquí no quiero
But
moverme.
I
Aquí
don't want to
estoy muy
move. I'm happy
Ajá.
here. Gracias, don Gabriel. ¿Nos puede decir dónde vive?
Yo vivo
I live
la North Street,
in a farm on North Street, close to
429 North
Puente,
Street. Aquí en la escuelita vieja.
in what it
high
was
school
the old
que-
high school of Pescadero, and it was converted into housing.
Y aquí estamos.
¿Y con cuántas personas vives?
Y yo vivo con 3 personas
I live with
Yes.
3 people,
en un solo
plus me
cuartito.
in
Estamos
one small room, so 4 of us are together.
4 personas.
So
Ahí.
4 people. Okay. I also wanted to add that about Don Gabriel, and especially because we've seen, more senior farm workers. ¿Usted cuántos años tiene, Don Gabriel?
Pues fíjate que yo no llevo en cuenta los años. Solamente te voy a decir mi edad, o sea, mi fecha de
Ajá.
nacimiento y ya tú sacas.
Okay.
Yo
Okay.
soy del año 1946.
Okay. He said, like, I don't know how old I am. I'll tell you my year and then you do the math. So he's 77 years old. And he's still working. And because we're seeing this increase on farm workers aging, and as you know, farm workers contribute on their every check, they put money towards Social Security, right? And when they retire, well, they cannot afford to retire, so they don't. Because if they retired, they would have access to Social Security because of their legal status. They can't touch all the money. So I often say that farm workers are sponsoring our retirement. They are sponsoring my retirement because I'm going to retire and I'm going to have access to Social Security money that they have put into the system for 30, 40, 50 years. And so they don't have that safety net that people when they retire can have access to. And as you know, there's a project in Half Bay going on, and I was just reading in the newspaper recently too, that is going to be for senior farm workers And so what we are going to start doing is, as we continue to hear about these sessions, to hear from people and provide input on the project, like I think it's fair that we organize transportation and get people like Manuel and Gabriel to provide input on that project, and hopefully they will benefit from that housing for seniors that might be coming up in Half Moon Bay. It seems like the project is going really strong with Mercy Housing and with Dallas, and I think that is very, very needed housing. And it's definitely easier to do stuff in Half Moon Bay than Pescadero. So most of the people don't like the idea of driving that far, but for people that are aging, that is actually a solution. The other thing that I wanted to share about Don Gabriel is that he had lived in different places over the years, but one time I checked in with him about where because I understood he was kind of taking care of a house. And so I asked him, like, where do you stay? Like, you're taking care of this house. And he was taking care of the gardening and all that. And I thought that at night he was staying in one of the rooms. And he told me, well, the people don't actually know that I spend the nights there. So he built himself almost like a chicken coop in the back of the property. And that's where he was staying. And I was shocking about his situation, because I think we were talking about it particularly in the winter time, and that he didn't feel that he could share that with anybody. And I learned it after the fact. But there's the things that we see and the things that we just will never know unless we have this opportunity and the trust of people to hear about it. So right now he's in a different place, and he told you about, he's sharing this room with other 4 people, and they have a shared kitchen and shared bathrooms. And that particular property is one that we continue looking at for a potential housing site. And there's already some of the housing in there. So we're looking into potentially doing the property management to the place and getting some grants to fix that kitchen and to really renovate those bathrooms that are in such terrible shape. And I will be very honest, I think when Penny came, I shared this with her. There's all these wrong things with housing, and there's good examples too. I mean, there's some people that provide really decent housing for farm workers. It's just most of it is not ideal housing. And we're talking right now with individual farm workers. We call them, single farm workers, because other people that could participate in something like this are working this morning, but they're here on their own. Their families are in Mexico. And so they put up with a lot more when it comes to housing that is in bad shape. When families have children, I think they try to provide something better, and so they end up paying more on rent so that their kids are in a safer place. Okay, and then we'll go to questions afterwards, but vamos a pasar ahora con Manuel. We're gonna talk with Manuel next. Manuel, si nos quieres comentar, Manuel number 2, si nos quieres comentar de dónde vienes y cómo es que llegaste a Pescadero.
Primero que nada, buenos días a todos y
First, good morning, everyone.
aquí a Rita y a don
Thank you so
Gabriel
much
que
for reading
pasaron
Don
la
Gabriel
información
to send me the information and
aquí
invite
con
me
ustedes.
today to join you today.
Yo me llamo Manuel
My
Martínez
name is
López
Manuel Martínez López,
y vengo de Oaxaca.
and I come from Oaxaca.
Y allá pues trabajaba
And there
en el campo
I was
también.
working in the fields too.
Y la primera vez que yo vine
The
tenía
first time
16 años.
that I came, I was 16.
Llegué acá y
And
fue un poco difícil
it
para
was
encontrar un poco de trabajo.
hard to get
Hubo una persona
work.
que me consiguió un trabajo cortando menta.
There was a person that got me a
Fue mi
job
primer
cutting
trabajo.
mint, and that was my first job.
Y después duré 2 años
And
ahí.
then I worked there 2 years.
Cambié a una honguera
And then I moved to work at a mushroom farm.
y de ahí me regresé otra vez a Oaxaca.
And then I went back to Oaxaca.
Y ahora estamos
And now
aquí en el
we're here
2022.
again. We came in 2022.
Y en febrero voy a cumplir
And
ya 2 años.
In February, it's gonna be 2
El 14
years
de febrero.
since we're here actually.
Y ahora regresé y estoy trabajando
And now that I came back,
en una granja.
I'm working at a farm.
Y me gusta mucho porque también en
And I
Oaxaca
like the work
hemos trabajado con animales
because in Oaxaca I used to work with
y acá
animals,
me ha gustado mucho siempre llegar a pescadero aquí
and here I always
porque hay
like
mucho
to
trabajo
come
para
to
mí
pescadero, and there's a lot of work for
en
me
el campo.
in the fields.
También en la temporada cuando el
And
trabajo está muy
also
bien,
when the
trabajo
work
7
is
días
really well
Voy
on the high
dos
season, I
días
work 7 days.
en una compañía de feed crop,
I work 2 days
verduras.
for Fifth Crow, and they grow different produce.
Y igual le agradezco aquí a
And-
Rita y a todos
And I'm
el
grateful
grupo
here
que
for
tienen y
Rita
a
and
todos
everybody
ustedes
in
por
the group
poner un
and for
granito de
you
arena para
to
nosotros.
contribute with the grain of
Y
rice towards us.
me gusta porque nos apoyan
And I like that
en
you
casi
support
todo
us on
porque
almost
nos dan
everything.
orientación de cómo hacer las cosas y
We
todo.
get a lot of orientation about how to do a lot of things.
Y es lo que me ha gustado de
And
aquí
that's
de
what I have
Pescadero
liked about
porque
Pescadero.
está muy bonito,
It-
casi coincide con
it
lo de
is,
Oaxaca, muchos árboles,
As pretty as Oaxaca.
trabajo
There's a lot of trees.
y es poquito más, el dinero es más,
And
nos rinde
the
mucho.
money, we make it stretch more.
Igual vivo acá, en 249, es 429.
I also live, donde vive Gabriel, no?
Sí.
I live in the same
Ujú.
place that Gabriel lives.
Nada más que yo vivo en un cuarto
But I
con otra
live
persona,
in
somos dos
a
nada más.
room with 2 people. It's just 2 of us.
Y sí, es muy bonito y me gusta que ustedes están
And
escuchándonos a nosotros
I'm grateful
como
that you're listening to us
trabajadores del
today
campo
as farm workers.
y les doy las gracias
And thank you.
por reunirse con nosotros y escuchar un
Thank you
poquito de
for
cada uno.
gathering with us and listening a little bit about each of our stories.
Y pues yo tengo 36
And
años,
I'm
soy del 9 de
36.
marzo de 1987.
I was born in 1987. Ok, don Manuel, yo he estado en esa vivienda, hay un cuartito que abrieron, donde antes había las lavadoras, y luego hay un cuartito que pusieron donde era la oficina. ¿En cuál está usted?
En la oficina.
Ah, okay. So I was just trying to know exactly which room he had because we've visited that property, and I think people try to do, and this please keep confidential, but people try to do the best they can also to help community, some people. And in this particular case, when we were looking at the property, I saw that there was one room that it used to be their laundry room and they converted it. And so now it was a room and there's people living there, but it's a hazard. Like there's no windows, there's just the door, and I got very concerned about it. And the place where Manuel is living now is a place that was the office for the administration of that housing, and they converted it also in a room. That's where the 2 people are, but at least that place has windows and access, and it's super tiny. I mean, it's super small, but again, the other room with no access, it just kind of concerns me the most. But again, people are trying to be helpful and to provide something. It's just, it's just not ideal. So let's see, we can do some questions, I think, first, and then I can talk to you a little bit more about some of the other housing, or why housing is so challenging on the coast. And you can ask directly, or you can put your questions on the chat if you want.
Okay, I think, Rita, in order to facilitate that, then we probably need to have, maybe Chuck, if you can put us all up so that we can see who has questions, and then I can maybe just call on folks to help sort of facilitate it a little bit. Okay, so I see Penny's hand up. And that's the only one I see right now. So Penny, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks. And thank you, Gabriel and Manuel 1, Manuel 2 for sharing. So Rita, I'm wondering if you could tell us, or the guys could tell us, what kind of rents are you talking about, for a room? And are there still people, I wasn't sure when you're talking about the room that was the laundry room, are there people still in there? Just give us a sense like when I visited you, you know, we saw some of those trailers also and the kind of rents that you were telling me about. Maybe give a larger context for this group about that.
Compartir, ¿cuánto pagan de renta?
Yo,
Manuel.
sí, yo, ahorita. Ya puedo, pues
Sí.
ya, pues.
Sí.
No, pues ahorita yo
So Don Manuel is gonna share first
donde yo vivo, ya
where
estamos
he
pagando
lives.
400
He's paying
cada mes.
$400
pero, pues, cada rato nos están subiendo la
every
renta,
month per
pero
person.
no esperamos, en cualquier rato nos la van a subir de
And
nuevo.
remember, he lives with 3 other people.
Y ahí estamos en el
And
cuarto donde estoy yo. somos tres,
constantly they are increasing the
de
rent.
400 a cada persona.
So this man is renting
¿eh?
this room
Por el
at
cuarto,
$1,200 per room.
Y
And it's a
luego-
very small room.
y luego los cuartos pues, están bien chiquitos.
The rooms are very small.
Están bien chiquitos y 400 y pues
Yeah.
cuando estábamos con el señor Miguel,
Uh,
estaba un poco mejor, pero ahora que entró la señora.
When the owner of the farm was managing them, the rent was lower, but now that es su hija, ¿verdad?
Sí, su
Her
hija.
daughter is managing the property, they have increased the rents a lot. And again, I know we agreed to videotape this, but the owner of that farm is the president of the Farm Bureau, and he's been on the news, and you've seen some of the housing on the news, but I've been there. There's no furniture except for the beds and one mini fridge per person. And that's something that I've been talking to my team, that perhaps we can figure out a way to just at least bring some furniture, because if you enter the rooms, like all their belongings are on the floor because there's no like, you know, closets or things like that to organize them. So it always looks like they're arrived from somewhere or they're ready to go somewhere, if you know what I mean. Let me just find out. I see other hands, but let me just find out. Gabriel, ¿tú quieres compartir cuánto pagas tú de renta?
Sí, cómo no. Pues yo por mí estoy pagando
Gabriel,
nada más yo.
just,
O meto al
no,
compañero.
tú
Sí.
solo. Yeah.
Yo solo estoy pagando 410
He pays $410 a month,
y estamos ahí
and
cuatro,
there's 4 people in that room.
cada uno lo mismo.
So each of them pays
410
the
es la
same
que pagamos al mes.
on a monthly basis. ¿Tú, Manuel?
Sí, igual yo estoy pagando 315,
I pay 315,
pero como somos dos,
but it's just 2
son
of us.
630
So
por-
they charge $630 per month
pero
for the
sí,
room.
también está chiquito.
And
pero
it's also
pues
very small.
ya no
And
encontramos más.
but we didn't find anything else.
Y pues tenemos que conformarnos
So
con
we
eso
have
que
to be
encontramos, ¿verdad?
content to
Por
find a
estar
place,
aquí tan siquiera trabajando.
and at least we can stay in the community and work. Penny, and thank you for the question, because you wanted me to provide a little bit more context. And so they live in what we call farm labor housing, right? And so these are low rents because there are some regulations about how much someone can charge. It's still a lot of money for them, but there's no, I mean, I know people, farm worker people that are working like on the $2,500 a month, because that's the only place they found. We know of a woman who spoke at the Board of Supervisors recently, and she was saying how she pays $1,700 for the land, and she owns her own trailer that she puts on the land. And so there's no trend. It is really like a wild west around here when it comes to rents, and people charge whatever they decide to charge. Now imagine this farm BJ's has 2-3 workers, and he houses so many people. So at some point he's more of a landlord than a farmer, right? And it's a regular income for him. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just people stay in the job, because if they leave sometimes those jobs, then they lose the housing, and they lose the $400 housing, and they have to move into the $2,000, $2,500 housing. So let me know if there's more questions about that, Penny, but yeah, it's like all over the place when it comes to what people can afford to pay. I'll pass it back onto you to facilitate.
Okay, so Lauren has a question, and then Moshe has Rabbi Moshe has a question that is in the chat.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much for the time and your stories. But here's a question which I'm not aware of, which is how much do people make on a daily basis? Like, what would the range be, so that therefore we can make a comparison with how much people are taking in each day? And I know it's variable, I get that, but also then the rents, because we know the numbers to a certain extent.
¿Se sienten cómodos compartiendo? Yo sé que no has trabajado en 2 años, Manuel, pero ¿cuánto ganabas cuando estabas trabajando? So Manuel hasn't worked in 2 years, but I'm asking him how much was he earning before.
Trabajaba yo en un lugar, pues, como en tiempo de
So when
del
I was
verano,
working in Blue House Farm,
nos daban 8 horas,
we
8
were
horas diarias.
working 8 hours every day.
Póngale que nos saca unos 1,100, pero por quincena.
And we will make about 2,200 per month.
Pero en tiempo del invierno, pues era bien
But in the
complicado,
winter time,
a duras penas unos 500,
like
400.
we will be making about half a month, because it's such a seasonal job. It changes with nurseries. Nurseries usually can work year round, but crops is really hard, and so they really follow the season. So if you want to do the math of the 2,200 a month and the 500 a month, yeah. ¿Tú, Gabriel?
Pues yo el 2020,
In
en el
2020,
2020 estuve trabajando con los
when I
chicos
was working with the
Me
at
pagaban-
this Chinese farm,
a 12 la hora.
I was getting paid $12 the hour.
A 12 la hora. Me pagaban y trabajábamos
And we were
8 horas.
working 8 hours a day. Okay.
Y ya en el 21,
And in
que
2021,
poquito tiempo nomás,
I worked only a little
me
bit.
pagaron a 13.
They were paying 13.
Y eso fue para despedirme.
And
ya
that
cuando me
was,
despidieron,
and then they let me go after that.
a
yeah.
13 la hora. Igual el tiempo, 8 horas.
Yeah. So, because we usually talk about farm workers individually making between $25,000 to $28,000. But the other thing that I often feel that is just not taken into consideration is that even like in these 3 examples, when they're here, their families are in Mexico. They're really sustaining a family of 6 or 5 in Mexico. And they don't qualify for some services because they are looked into the US as being a family of one, a household of one, and they make too much money to qualify for health insurance or those kind of things. And so what we do, and I'll be honest with you, I mean, we help them do this, Puente and the farm workers, we just wait for the low season, and that's the time where we apply, or sometimes they don't work for a couple of weeks so that their check is so low that they can qualify for health insurance. So we have to just figure out the way, but honestly, neither Puente staff should be trying to figure this out. They should just have access to health insurance, period. Some of the farm workers have ended up in the emergency room. And at least I remember like one particular story where after he went to the emergency room, he got a bill for $12,000 because emergency services are actually very expensive. Unfortunately, so this man was stressed about the bill. I've been in debt. I don't know about you, but when you're in debt, it's such a stressor. I mean, you really don't know what are you going to do, how are you going to get out of this? And in his case, he was so stressed about it that he was just ready to flee to Mexico, and hopefully the bill wouldn't follow him. But he came to the team, and the team ended up contacting the hospital in Santa Cruz. And at the end of the day, actually, he qualified for support. So his debt was 0. And his body, his face, just everything changed when he heard the news. And so sometimes what we do is like that kind of advocacy is not about writing the check for the 12,000. It's about advocating people to know that there's services that they qualify for. And the man changed. I mean, it was just like such a heavy weight on him. So let me just go with Manuel. ¿Tú, Manuel, nos quieres compartir más o menos cuánto gana un trabajador del campo?
No, pues ahorita estoy ganando, metiendo 40 horas a la semana,
So
son
I'm working
80 a la
40
quincena,
hours a week,
y pues me están pagando a
and
16.50.
I get $16.50
Y
an hour, which is the
hay
minimum
veces
wage for an
completo
incorporated.
las 80
And
y hay
sometimes
veces
I
que
complete
me
the
paso
80
poquito y
hours
sale de
every paycheck.
1200, de
And sometimes I
1150,
do a little
así.
bit of
Varía
overtime.
poquito en las horas que
It
puedo
varies
meter.
a little bit on the number of hours that I can make.
Sí,
So he's more on the 30,000 K a year working full time. ¿Tu trabajo baja también en el invierno?
poquito, casi
So
no
his
mucho,
work
porque como son
slows down in
animales,
the
tenemos
winter,
que
but
ir
not as
aunque
much
llueva.
because he works with animals. So year round, they have to care for them.
Tenemos que ir aunque
Yep.
llueva porque
And even if it's
están
raining,
comiendo
because they
todos
gotta
los
eat
días, sí.
every day.
Pero sí merma poquito en la
But
cuestión que
it
cuando
slows
está
down
muy
a
fuerte
little
el
bit,
agua, tenemos que
especially like when
apretar
there's like
para-
heavy rains, we have to just wait it out. Okay, muchas gracias.
Sí, sí.
Let me just see the question here on the chat. So the question is whether the farm owners or employers have responsibility to provide the housing or people are on their own. So there's no requirement that they need to provide housing. Some of them do, and it's not that I'm sarcastic anymore. It's just like I've been here for a long time, and I can tell you like the housing that is permitted housing, labor housing permitted, like, by the county and all that, is so old that is in really bad shape, and it needs a lot of investment. And what I've heard is the county telling me, we're not gonna use tax dollars to fix private property. And then I hear the employer saying, we don't have the money to fix the units. And there's a little bit of truth in both. At the end of the day, it's like, who's sleeping in those beds, in those walls? And I think that's kind of like where Puente is at this moment, right? And also, there's housing that is unpermitted, but it's more recently built, like in the past 4 years, right? And so that housing is in much better shape, but the owners are in constant fear that, they're gonna get in trouble because they'll build it without permits. And so I think it's about choosing which level do you wanna be in. And I think for now, we're trying to work at the advocacy level. Some of the farmers, there's good examples, there's some good players that provide the best they can, but usually they charge too, $1,000 for a room or a trailer or something. And then there's definitely like really bad apples, people that just try to get as much as they can. There's greed, and it doesn't matter, who has to pay for it. They just charge, and they know that people are gonna pay for it because there's nowhere else to go. And so, but it's not a requirement, Rabbi, we try to help. There's not enough housing. So even when people come to Puente to try to help them find a place, I mean, it's not even a program we have just because there's nothing, right? And then, but outside of Puente, if anything comes up, we have talked to some people about renting something at a low price and they help us. But it's very rare that something is available, really, really, really rare. And in terms of safer working conditions and an update on drinking water, I've seen the trailers, so now they're moving bathrooms closer and they have the water. And I think it will be good for us to do a little bit of a study just to make sure that people are complying with those requirements. But I think there's so much attention on farm workers right now that most people really out of fear started doing what they needed to do. But the water is one of those big issues. People don't trust it in general. And so unless it's jug water, they'll drink from it. And some of the farms, the water has been contaminated in the past, but they got grants to clean it up, and they're having clear issues about that. but the high school, you probably are aware, our Pescado High School doesn't have potable water. And that's why this meeting tomorrow at the Coastal Commission is so important, because potentially it's going to be the line to extend the boundaries of where the water stops all the way to the high school. And that's going to at least change for them. And you'll hear the parents. I mean, what they want is just not to worry about their children not having clean water at the school and depending on bottled water all the time. It's one of those basic things. I don't even know why we're having this conversation. Like sometimes I'm surprised that after more than 10 years, we're still talking about this. And what it helps, in my opinion, is to bring the issue to the top of the agenda of our elected officials, to talk about it every time you can when you're interacting with people at the county, because it's easy for them to forget about us. And unfortunately, if there's ongoing pressure, I feel that is when things are getting resolved. And there's been so much pressure in the last 6 months about the lack of water. And even the organizations have been talking about it for a long time. Farm workers went to the Board of Supervisors and they spoke about water. And actually, that is what started turning things around, hearing directly from them, the way that you're hearing directly from them. So, yeah.
Oops, wait a minute. Here, okay. Now, Sister Joan Marie has a question.
I have a question and a comment. What I recall, maybe somebody can help me out on this, is that when they had those terrible mass shootings in Half Moon Bay, that woke some of our, legislators up to checking things out. And my recollection is that part of what the county was going to do was to hold the owners of farms to some accountability for the conditions that they observed when they got involved. That was one of my, and maybe somebody can respond to that. But the second thing is, and I was so glad to hear you mention it, Rita, that you're working with Mercy Housing. I'm a sister of Mercy, and we sponsor Mercy Housing in about 22 states, including California. So I'm really happy about that, because I think the direction that the county needs to go is to support, permanent affordable housing that includes, farm workers, particularly seniors. And I understand, at least right now in Half Moon Bay, that there's a project underway that was proposed by Mercy Housing and Alas on Kelly Avenue in Half Moon Bay. And I don't know where it is at this particular point, but I think that collaboration is really essential. So if anybody can enlighten me about the supervisors after the shootings, it'd be good information.
Thank you for the question. So in terms of the, after the shooting in Half Moon Bay, some elected officials said that they hadn't realized the housing situation. I wouldn't argue about that, but I think the housing among farm workers has been known to many people at the county for many years. But they decided to put together a task force to visit every farm that they had information about, because some of the farms they didn't even know they were around. It is a good thing, and we support it. We support that they do, and farm workers actually support the inspections. I think where farm workers have expressed to us some of their frustration is that because the county is playing a role in which they're trying to identify the housings that are not up to code, but are also not creating a displacement, which is good, because where are we going to help people move if they were to be displaced? And so because they're avoiding displacement, unless they call it there's a health kind of life-threatening situation, right? Then they will red tag a home. And so what I'm hearing from farm workers, and they have mentioned this to the county themselves, is that there's no consequences then for an employer providing housing that is not in good shape, and they want to see more accountability. I think what it definitely is making happen, because I saw it, is that some of the farmers and employers that needed to make improvements, they got scared about the task force, and I saw roofs being replaced, units being painted, windows being fixed. And so I think more out of fear on the regulations than because it is the right thing to do, but nevertheless, it had a little bit of an impact. But there's other places that the fixes are just a facelift so that they look okay, but not necessarily a structural fix. And that doesn't address anyways the units being just crowded and things like that. And I just wanted to clarify, like, we're not working, we actually have met with Mercy Housing and we love the work that they do. We haven't worked with them in the sense of having a partnership yet. One, because they develop higher number of units. Same thing with, we met with Habitat for Humanity, we met with Mercy, and we met with Mid-Penn. They all do like, 50 and up. Mercy actually in Half Moon Bay is doing the 40 units in partnership with Atlas. But because those kind of projects, depending on how they're funded, people from Pescadero could qualify for that. That's why we want to be engaged in the process, in the planning process. But we haven't, I think my team attended one of the meetings, but we want to attend more. But when we met with Mercy, I think in between the lines is like, whatever we do in Pescadero, I don't think is ever going to be a 40-unit project. And so when we went to the housing summit that Penny and others organized, that was great because we identified this other group on the East Bay that actually do anything from 5 to 20 units, something like, I think it's going to be more of the partnership that we need. And we met with Jake. We met with him and his team. And again, like, I feel that they're so willing to help once we have identified a piece of land that is that can be developed.
Right. One more question. Is it even realistic to think that there could be, I understand what you're getting at, realistic to have what I would just call, for lack of better words, transitional housing situations, clean, decent, livable places that would be strategically placed, the hope being that folks would move into more permanent housing.
I think for our community, really what we need is permanent housing solutions. I almost feel that half of my community lives in transition housing, right? Like waiting for something to open up to move to a better place. And so there's plenty of farms for sale in our community. It's just the amount of money that they're asking for is too much. But I do believe that if we continue talking to our representatives at the county, I mean, I see how much money goes into a lot of projects in our county, right? And so it's just different priorities, but you've seen how much money is going to the Tunitas project, and I love parks, don't get me wrong, I love it. I was part of the process. How much money is going to go into the lighthouse, how much money, so I don't think it's impossible to say, let's just invest and buy one of these big farms that are for sale and actually do everything that they need to do to add housing. So I think what I've been seeing a lack of sometimes is the political will. And also because I've seen that in some areas, the county's understaffed. And so we, like farm workers that I have met with our supervisor and with Assembly Member Mark Bergman, they're telling them like, we're really happy for what's happening in Half Moon Bay. They really are. But they continue to say, like, don't forget that we're not Half Moon Bay, we are in Pescadero, we're far away, and we also need housing. And someone to Mark and to Supervisor Mueller, they said, like, are you really waiting for a mass shooting to happen here so that we can get your attention and get like speed up process for housing? And it's just such an unfair situation, and they just feel often that they're not a priority because we're smaller, we're farther away, and they just feel that sometimes they get unheard. And so I think that's why you've noticed, like even like our guests today, they're actually excited to have forums to talk about and to inform other people about their situation and their stories.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to take one last question from Deacon Lauren, and then I'm going to just make a couple of final comments.
All right, well, it's a follow-up question. That mass shooting happened on January 23rd, and it did bring a lot of awareness within our county about what happened and the housing issues and all of that. And I'm just curious if there's any way in a respectful memorial type of situation to draw attention to that and to ask those questions to the Board of Supervisors and the powers that be. Where are we a year later? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I know, and probably some of the folks from Half Moon Bay and the Skull can share more, but I understand that the Half Moon Bay put out a committee to memorialize and honor those lives suddenly taken. And that probably will contribute to bring more attention. I think Alas has been doing a very good job just getting the message out and speaking about housing, especially because they got a lot of access to kind of like bigger media in channels, even at the national level. And I think that has been very helpful. And I think that honestly, that's probably why has contributed to money from the state to come down to the county and to be promised to those projects. So I think that's good. What I think we should do more is continue speaking at the Board of Supervisors level. So when farm workers went to talk back in October, we did, I asked community members, because I was worried about, sometimes I worry about the potential retaliation from the landlords that hear them speaking. And so I did activated some people to say, please also add comments to their comments, just so that there's, a support system that they feel that other people are listening to them too, not just the elected officials. And like 5 members from the community, particularly from Half Moon Bay, joined the call and made comments about it and appreciated that they came. And I think what that is doing is they're really building a very strong spirit about owning their stories and advocating, knowing that there could be some backlash, but that they are doing this not just for them, but for the entire community. And one of the women in particular, she spoke and she brought pictures in her home flats every single year for like 28 years, right? And she's cooking in the winter time with boots on because the water is inside her kitchen. And she was very afraid about talking there. And then she mentioned it again in a local pescadero meeting. And last week when we met with this particular group, she was sharing that the landlord actually started fixing the things that she has been talking about, and that she sent the construction people to her to say like, they say that you need to tell us how you want your steps inside and outside, because the landlord said that is like you are in charge. And so they built a little wall so that the creek doesn't flood into her kitchen anymore. And she was just like, it's such a small win for the movement, but it's such a huge win for her that is one of the persons that is gonna go speak at the Coastal Commission, right? Because now they feel like, okay, if we continue speaking, something, maybe little, but something is happening collectively. And so I think we want more of those opportunities. But you have, there's people that hear you. So I know some of you already do and speak about housing and about justice in every space that you do, and that's how you live. But if you have that opportunity, I think what we will appreciate is that you continue to remind people that the South Coast also has high needs. Yeah.
Right. I will just say I've worked a lot with the Board of Supervisors, and we recognize and the power of the stories we need to hear from our neighbors. So thank you very much. And so it's a collaborative effort is my point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Rita, I want to thank you on behalf of the cohort for coming today and for sharing as you have. And I also want to thank the gentlemen that are with you for sharing their stories. We appreciate hearing. And what we really want to know at this point is, what can we as a cohort do? It sounds like there's a lot of power if you're in the Half Moon Bay or in the Pescadero area, but what can we do as the Peninsula Solidarity cohort to support the work that Puente is doing?
Ok, ¿alguno de ustedes quiere decir qué pueden hacer ellos para apoyar? Y luego yo puedo decir algo más.
Ay, caray, pues ahí sí está un poco complicado para saber.
Tú, mi hermano, no te estás mal, porque no tengo letras en la entera del mundo.
¿Qué pueden hacer ellos
Para
para-
apoyarlos a ustedes.
para
Ujú.
apoyarnos? Pues,
Como en cosas de vivienda
Sí,
o
ujú.
como...
a ver,
They're thinking, they're saying that they don't have the words for it. ¿Quieren que yo conteste? ¿Prefieren?
sí,
Okay,
ahorita
so
yo-
they're okay if I answer that question. So I think, you know, there's gonna be a time for things. So like right now we're you know, we're exploring and trying to find a piece of land, but we have other things just so aligned and ready to go. But I can assure you today that there's gonna be a need for us to get support to change zoning, to waive certain requirements, to waive cost of permits and all those things. And I would love to rely on you to give us that kind of support. I also think that again, if you have any face interaction with our representatives, just ask them. This is all I ask. Just ask them. And what are you doing for the South Coast? Just that. The other thing, just a little bit more in depth. The next step to that is the San Mateo County actually has about 70 acres in Pescadero in a place called Bing Hollow. They own this land, and they need to do something related to housing on this land. And farm workers are pushing for that. And I still haven't seen anything tangible about what they're doing. So if you want to go the next step, just ask them, are you doing any housing on Bing Hollow? Or what's happening with the property in Bing Hollow? But that's not property that the county needs to buy. They already own it. I actually had the honor to visit with Supervisor Corso. She came and I took her to their land and I'm like, this is your land. This is the county land. And she was so surprised. She didn't know. And then David Canepa also came and I'm like, hey, this is a piece of land that belongs to the county. And same thing. He was like, oh, I didn't know we have this land. So I'm like, please talk to the board and try to figure it out. But I think those two things help. And then on an ongoing basis, just, you know, you already support us really. And I'm very grateful to that. And so I'll just continue sending you information about maybe places where farm workers are going to be speaking and invite you to support them. And I feel that especially when it comes to racial justice, this is where, you know, white people, you really provide sometimes safety in the room for people of color to be brave and to speak. And even to me, I'll tell you, there's times where I struggle with some of our elected officials, and when I feel that I can be who I am because I have the support of other people and I can take the risk, I think I do a better job for my community. So, you know, we all have different levels of privilege. And I think, you know, these are good spaces where you can be very helpful to the farm worker community.
Okay, thank you so much. We will do all we can. And thank you for the Ben Hollow property, because
Please.
that is something that we can and will push for
Yep.
with the County Board of Supervisors. If they own the land, then there's really no excuse to not build affordable, safe, and decent
Yeah.
housing for people that do so much for this area. Gracias, señores. We're so happy to have had you. Thank you so much